What happens when a man who has everything meets a woman who has lost it all? For Tom Sterling, a titan of industry with a net worth rivaling a small country, the world was his chessboard. The people in it, merely pawns. On the most important night of his life, with a $300 million deal on the line, he saw the waitress serving his table as less than a pawn. She was invisible. But a single act of casual cruelty was about to unravel his empire. He had no idea that this invisible woman held the key to his future, a secret weapon hidden in plain sight, ready to change everything with a few words he could never possibly understand. The air in Midtown Manhattan on that crisp September evening was thick with the scent of ambition and exhaust fumes. For Tom Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations, it tasted of victory. At 38, he had the kind of chiseled good looks and ruthless reputation that made magazine covers and terrified competitors. He hadn't inherited his empire. He had forged it from nothing but a brilliant mind, a borrowed laptop and a sleep-depriving work ethic that had incinerated his youth. His company was on the cusp of revolutionizing renewable energy with its next-generation heliostat technology, and tonight was the culmination of 2 years of relentless globe-trotting negotiations. The deal was with Sheikh Khalid Al Jamil, the venerable head of the Saudi Arabian Royal Investment Authority. This wasn't just about money. The $300 million was, of course, transformative, but the Sheikh's backing was a seal of approval that would catapult Sterling Innovations into the stratosphere, silencing a chorus of Wall Street doubters. A failure tonight would be catastrophic. It would be perceived not as a stumble, but as a fatal flaw in Tom's leadership. The vultures were always circling. He strode into Aria, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, only a discreetly monogrammed oak door. The interior was a symphony of hushed tones, dark wood, and recessed lighting that made every table feel like a private world. Tom's world tonight consisted of a corner table with a panoramic view of the city lights, a view he wouldn't even notice. His team was already there. Robert Vance, his seasoned CFO, and a nervous young translator named Michael. "Are they here?" Tom's voice was low and clipped, dispensing with pleasantries. "5 minutes out," Mr. Sterling, Robert said, adjusting his tie. "Traffic on the FDR." Tom's gaze swept the room, his mind a whirlwind of contractual clauses, currency exchange projections, and counter-arguments to any possible objection the Sheikh might raise. His eyes flickered past the staff, moving with quiet efficiency. He registered them as he might register the well-oiled hinges on a door functional present and utterly unimportant. One of those functional parts was Isabella Rossi. To the patrons of Aria, Isabella was a model of professional grace. Her uniform was immaculate, her movements fluid, and her smile, though faint, was always ready. She refilled water glasses before they were half empty and anticipated needs with an almost supernatural intuition. But beneath the polished veneer was a story of profound loss. Just 4 years ago, Isabella wasn't serving tables in New York. She was studying political science and comparative literature at the prestigious University of Damascus. Her father had been a celebrated diplomat, a man who believed in building bridges through language and culture. Their home in Syria was filled with books in a dozen languages, and the air hummed with intellectual debate. Arabic, her mother tongue, was a language of poetry and history. French was the language of her schooling English, the language of global affairs. She spoke all three with the effortless fluency of a native. Then the war came. It didn't arrive with a formal declaration, but with the slow, terrifying creep of chaos that stole friends, then neighbors, then hope itself. Her world, once a vibrant tapestry of culture and promise, was shredded in a matter of months. They fled with nothing but 2 suitcases and the ghosts of the life they once knew. Her father, a man of words and peace, did not survive the stress and heartbreak of exile. Her mother, now frail and haunted, lived with her in a cramped queen's apartment that cost more than their entire Damascus home. The job at Aria was a lifeline. It was grueling, often thankless work, but it paid the bills and her mother's medical expenses. Each night she donned the uniform and locked away the scholar, the diplomat's daughter, the woman who once debated philosophy over mint tea. Here she was, just Isabella the waitress. She had learned to make herself small to be unobtrusive. She had learned that in this new world, her past didn't matter. No one cared that she could analyze 13th century Sufi poetry or debate the nuances of international trade agreements. They only cared if their steak was medium rare. Tonight, she was assigned to the corner table. She recognized Tom Sterling from the business journals her father used to read. She saw the tension coiled in his shoulders and the predatory sharpness in his eyes. He was a man accustomed to command, to having the world bend to his will. She felt a familiar pang, a mix of admiration for his success and a deep, aching nostalgia for a world where she too had a seat at the table, not just an apron to serve it. As she placed the leather-bound menus on the table, Tom didn't even look up from his phone. He simply waved a dismissive hand, a gesture that said, "You are not important right now." For Isabella, it was nothing new. It was just another Tuesday. She retreated into the shadows, a silent observer waiting for the play to begin. She had no idea she was about to be thrust into the starring role. Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil and his young aide Fahad arrived with the quiet gravitas of old money and absolute power. The sheikh was in his late 60s, with a neatly trimmed white beard and eyes that held the wisdom of 1,000 desert nights. He wore a traditional thobe and gutra, a stark contrast to the sharp Italian suits of Tom's team. Fahad, his nephew and protege, was Western-educated, sharp and fluent in English, but always deferred to his uncle with deep respect. Greetings were exchanged. The translator, Michael, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, nervously facilitated the initial pleasantries. Tom, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, steered the conversation toward business. Sheikh Khalid, we are honored. I trust your accommodations at the St. Regis are to your liking. Tom began, his voice smooth as polished marble. Michael translated, and the sheikh responded in Arabic. Michael's translation back was stiff, literal. He says the hotel is adequate. He thanks you for the inquiry. Isabella, standing a respectful distance away, flinched internally. The sheikh hadn't said adequate. His words were far more poetic. He had used a phrase that roughly translated to, "It provides a comfortable perch from which to view your magnificent city." The nuance, the graciousness, was completely lost. It was like describing a sunset as the end of the day. The dinner progressed awkwardly. Tom, a master of the boardroom, found the rhythm frustrating. Every point he made had to be filtered through Michael, and the replies that came back felt stripped of all personality and intent. He pushed the wine list toward the sheikh. Perhaps a bottle of the 82 Petrus. A fine year. Sheikh Khalid politely declined with a gesture. As a devout Muslim, he did not drink alcohol. It was a basic piece of cultural knowledge, a detail Tom's expensive prep team should have drilled into him. It was a small misstep, but in a negotiation of this magnitude, small things could fester. Isabella approached to take their order. "Good evening, gentlemen. Are you ready to order, or would you like another moment?" she asked, her voice soft and professional. Tom was in the middle of a thought, frustrated by the clumsy communication. He didn't look at her. "We'll need a minute." He then turned to Robert. "This translator is a liability. His timing is off. It's killing the momentum." As Isabella began to retreat, Tom, without thinking, gestured impatiently for more water. His hand movement was too sharp, too sudden. He knocked over his own glass, sending a cascade of ice water directly onto Isabella's apron and shoes. For Tom bit back a curse, his face tightening with annoyance, not concern. He looked at the puddle on the floor, then at her soaked apron, as if she were a piece of faulty equipment. "My sincerest apologies, sir," Isabella said immediately, her training kicking in as she reached for a napkin. Tom waved her off, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's fine. Just get it cleaned up. And send someone else over, please. We need to focus here." The words hung in the air, each one a tiny, sharp barb. Send someone else over. He wasn't just dismissing her, he was erasing her. He didn't see a person who had been drenched, only a problem to be removed. The insult wasn't in the spill, it was in the utter lack of humanity in his reaction. For a fleeting second, the polished mask of the waitress slipped. A flicker of hurt, of indignant pride, flashed in her eyes. It was the look of a diplomat's daughter being treated like a scullery maid. He didn't notice, of course. He had already turned back to his guests, his mind re-engaging the multi-million-dollar battle. Isabella felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. She mumbled another "excuse me," and walked quickly toward the kitchen, her squelching shoes a humiliating reminder of the encounter. Inside the steamy, clattering sanctuary of the kitchen, she leaned against a stainless steel counter, taking a deep breath to quell the sudden fierce tremor in her hands. It was the casual cruelty that stung the most, the complete and utter disregard. In that moment he hadn't just spilled water on her. He had poured contempt on the quiet dignity she fought so hard to maintain every single day. She wasn't a human being to him. She was a function, and she had just malfunctioned. Her manager, a stern but fair woman named Claire, saw her expression. "You okay, Rossi, table 12, giving you trouble?" "No, it's fine. Just an accident." Isabella lied, grabbing a dry cloth. "I can handle it." She refused to be chased off her station by a rich man's arrogance. It was a matter of pride. Her father had once told her, "Dignity is the only possession no one can take from you, Isabella. You can only give it away." She would not give it away tonight. Wiping her shoes and swapping her apron, she straightened her back, recomposed her features into a mask of polite neutrality, and prepared to walk back into the lion's den. Back at the table, the atmosphere had grown decidedly colder. Tom, trying to recover from the wine faux pas, launched into the technical specifications of his solar array technology. He spoke with passion and precision, outlining the efficiency gains, the patented energy storage system, and the projected output. Michael, the translator, was struggling to keep up. Technical jargon about photovoltaic cells and molten salt energy storage was a world away from the simple conversational Arabic he was comfortable with. He started to stammer his translations, becoming shorter, less confident. Sheikh Khalid listened patiently, stroking his beard. After Tom's 10-minute monologue, the sheikh began to speak. He spoke not to Michael, but directly to Tom, his gaze steady and intense. He spoke for several minutes in flowing, complex Arabic. His tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of steel. Everyone at the table turned to Michael. The young man swallowed hard, his face paling. He says he has some concerns. Michael began wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. He is worried about dust. The sand. In the desert. Tom frowned. Dust. We've accounted for that. Our automated cleaning systems are state-of-the-art. They use electrostatic repulsion and minimal water perfect for the desert environment. Tell him that. Michael relayed the message, his words clumsy and lacking conviction. The sheikh responded immediately, his voice taking on a sharper edge. He used a series of phrases and idioms that were deeply rooted in Bedouin culture and poetry. Michael looked utterly lost. Sir, he's talking about the loyalty of the wind and the memory of the sand. I don't understand. It's a very specific dialect. Robert Vance, the CFO, leaned in his voice a low growl. What do you mean you don't understand? You're a translator. It's not standard Arabic. Michael whispered frantically. It's poetic, metaphorical. I can't give you a literal translation, because it won't make sense. Sheikh Khalid stopped speaking and looked at them, his silence more damning than any accusation. He knew the boy was failing. Fahad. His nephew shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a look of deep concern on his face. He knew his uncle well. This was a test. Sheikh Khalid valued not just numbers and technology, but wisdom, respect, and the ability to understand the heart of a matter, not just its surface. He was testing their depth, and they were failing spectacularly. Tom's blood ran cold. He could feel the $300 million deal, the culmination of his life's work, slipping through his fingers like fine sand. The momentum wasn't just killed, it was being buried alive. Just translate what you can word for word, Tom hissed at Michael. Sir, he said something like, a mirror that cannot reflect the whole sky is worthless, no matter how clean you keep it. It doesn't make sense. It was then that Fahad, the nephew, intervened, speaking in perfect, unaccented English. Mr. Sterling, if I may. My uncle's concerns are not merely technical. He is speaking of the soul of the project. He fears that a design born in a New York skyscraper cannot truly understand the nature of the desert. The wind, the sand. They are not just engineering problems to him. They are living, breathing elements of our home. He is asking if your technology has respect for the land it will inhabit. Tom was floored. This was a cultural chasm he had no idea how to cross. His entire pitch was based on logic data and ROI. He was trying to sell a machine, but the sheikh was trying to understand its spirit. Sheikh Khalid spoke again, a final quiet statement in Arabic, and then placed his hands on the table, a gesture of finality. Michael translated weakly. He says, perhaps this is not the right partnership. Panic seized Tom. The deal was dead. It was dying right here on a Tuesday night in a ridiculously expensive restaurant, all because of metaphors about wind and sand. His empire was crumbling before his eyes. The room felt like it was closing in the quiet chatter from other tables, sounding like a roar in his ears. He looked at Robert, who was ashen-faced. He looked at the sheikh, whose calm expression was a mask of profound disappointment. He had failed. And standing just a few feet away, arranging silverware at an adjacent table, was Isabella. She had heard every word. She understood the poetry. She understood the sheikh's dialect. She understood the loyalty of the wind and the memory of the sand. And she understood with chilling clarity that the mirror the sheikh spoke of wasn't the solar panels. It was Tom himself. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct, every fiber of her being screamed at her to stay invisible. This was not her fight. The man at the center of this disaster was the same one who had looked through her, dismissed her, humiliated her. Why on earth should she help him? Helping him meant exposing herself, breaking the cardinal rule of her job and risking immediate termination. Losing this job would be devastating for her and her mother. She watched Tom Sterling's face, the mask of supreme confidence now cracked, revealing a raw, desperate fear she recognized. It was the look of someone watching their world crumble. She had seen that look before in the eyes of her father as they packed their lives into suitcases, in the faces of her neighbors as they said their final goodbyes. Her mind was a battlefield. One side, the pragmatic, wounded side, urged caution. Let him fail. What does he deserve from you? He saw you as nothing. Let him see what nothing feels like. But another voice, a voice that sounded remarkably like her father's, spoke of something else. It spoke of bridges. Her father had dedicated his life to bridging cultural divides, to using language not as a tool, but as a key to unlock understanding and empathy. He believed that the greatest tragedies occurred not from malice, but from a failure to truly listen. And she was listening. She understood what Farhad had tried to explain, but she grasped it on a deeper level. The sheikh wasn't just being poetic. He was voicing a profound ecological and spiritual concern. He was asking if Sterling Innovations had considered the wadis, the dry riverbeds that flood unexpectedly, or the haboob, the colossal sandstorms that could swallow a city whole. He was asking if they understood that the desert wasn't an empty canvas for their technology, but a complex ancient system that demanded respect. The memory of the sand referred to the shifting dunes that could bury a structure over decades, a phenomenon that required deep generational knowledge to predict. To let the deal fail over this misunderstanding felt like a betrayal of everything her father had stood for. It was a failure of communication, the very thing she was an expert in. Could she do it? Could she, Isabella Rossi, a waitress in a borrowed uniform, step onto this global stage? The fear was immense. Her voice might shake. They might laugh at her. Claire, her manager, would fire her on the spot. She looked at Tom Sterling again. He had already lost. He had nothing more to lose. But she did. She had everything to lose. Then her eyes met those of Sheikh Khalid. For a brief instant, his gaze flickered toward her. There was no recognition, just a deep, weary sadness. It was the look of a man who had traveled halfway around the world, hoping to find a partner, only to find a salesman. That look decided it. Taking a breath so deep, it felt like it was drawn from the very marrow of her bones, Isabella took one step forward, then another. The sound of her sensible work shoes on the polished floor seemed to echo in the sudden tense silence that had fallen over the table. Robert Vance noticed her first, a frown of annoyance creasing his forehead. "We don't need anything right now," he said curtly. Isabella didn't look at him. She looked directly at Tom Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice quiet but clear, betraying none of the terror she felt inside. "Forgive me. My name is Isabella Rossi. I believe I can help." Tom stared at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Help? Help with what I told you to send someone else. You're losing this deal because you are not speaking the same language." She interrupted the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "And I don't mean Arabic. Your translator is translating your words, but he is not conveying your meaning. And he cannot interpret the Sheikh's heart for you." The entire table stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. Michael, the translator, looked both horrified and relieved. Tom was speechless. This waitress, the one he had soaked with water and dismissed without a second thought, was standing here lecturing him on international diplomacy. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. "And who are you to?" he began, his voice dangerously low. But Isabella's gaze had already shifted. She turned to Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil and bowed her head slightly in a gesture of profound respect. And then she began to speak. Isabella spoke in Arabic. But it wasn't the hesitant textbook Arabic of the translator. It was the fluid, melodic, and deeply respectful dialect of a highly educated native speaker. It was the language of diplomats and poets, infused with the courtesy and nuance that the situation demanded. The effect was instantaneous. Sheikh Khalid's eyes, which had been hooded with disappointment, widened in astonishment. Fahad sat bolt upright, his jaw slack. Robert Vance and Tom Sterling could only stare their minds, struggling to process the impossible scene unfolding before them. Isabella began by apologizing profusely in Arabic for her impertinence in interrupting such an important meeting. She introduced herself not as a waitress, but as the daughter of a man who had revered the Sheikh's culture and wisdom from afar. Then she addressed the Sheikh's concerns. "Your Excellency," she said, her voice resonating with a confidence she didn't know she possessed, "the man before you, Mr. Sterling, is a man of numbers and wires. His language is that of efficiency and steel. It is a powerful language, but it is not yours. When you speak of the loyalty of the wind, he hears an engineering problem. He does not hear the voice of the jinn that our grandmothers told us about. When you speak of the memory of the sand, he thinks of abrasion coefficients, not of the ancient caravan routes that the dunes have buried and revealed over centuries." She paused, letting her words settle. The Sheikh was now leaning forward, his entire attention fixed on her. He nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Isabella then turned her head slightly, addressing Tom in crisp, clear English. "Mr. Sterling, Sheikh Khalid is not questioning your technology's durability. He is questioning its wisdom. He is asking if you have built a machine that will fight the desert, or one that will live in harmony with it. The mirror that cannot reflect the whole sky is not your solar panel. It is your perspective. He feels you are so focused on capturing the sun that you are blind to the land and the world they exist in." Tom was thunderstruck. It was as if a blindfold had been ripped from his eyes. In a few sentences, this woman had illuminated the vast, dark chasm of misunderstanding that he hadn't even known he was standing on the edge of. She hadn't just translated words. She had translated meaning, culture, and philosophy. Isabella turned back to the Sheikh. "Mr. Sterling's company has spent years studying the desert's climate. Perhaps he has not used the language of poetry to explain it, but his engineers have mapped the seasonal wind patterns, the shamal and the kaus. They have accounted for the shifting dunes in the foundation's design, using deep earth anchors, inspired by the very root systems of the garf trees that hold the desert together. His cleaning system was designed not to fight the sand, but to gently persuade it to leave like a guest who has stayed his welcome." She was improvising, connecting the technical details she had overheard with the cultural metaphors the Sheikh was using. She was building the bridge stone by stone, right there in the hushed dining room. Mr. Sterling's floor. she continued, her gaze now bravely meeting Tom's, is that he sees the desert as a resource to be conquered, not a partner to be respected. But his creation, the technology itself, may be wiser than its creator. It is designed to bow to the sun, to coexist with the wind, and to endure the sand. It is perhaps more respectful than his words have been. She concluded by turning once more to the sheikh. I ask your forgiveness for speaking out of turn. But I could not stand by and watch two great men from two great cultures fail to connect because they could not find a common language. She bowed her head again and stepped back, her role concluded. The silence that followed was profound. It was no longer tense or awkward. It was filled with a sense of awe. Sheikh Khalid looked at Isabella for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his wise eyes. He spoke, his voice now warm and resonant. Isabella turned to Tom, her professional composure fully restored, though her heart was still racing. The sheikh says, she translated softly, that it has been many years since he has met an engineer with the soul of a poet. He would like to hear more about these Gulf tree-inspired anchors. The deal was not just alive, it had been reborn. The rest of the dinner unfolded in an atmosphere so radically different from its beginning that it felt like a dream. The oppressive tension had evaporated, replaced by a current of vibrant intellectual energy that flowed directly from Isabella. She was no longer a ghost in the background, but the nexus of the entire conversation. At the quiet, insistent gesture of Sheikh Khalid, a chair was brought for her, placed not at the head of the table, but slightly to the side, a position that was both respectful and essential, like that of a trusted vizier. Tom watched, utterly captivated. He was witnessing a masterclass in diplomacy that no Ivy League business school could ever teach. When the conversation turned to the project's environmental footprint, the sheikh voiced a concern that was once again steeped in metaphor. A great tree that gives shade but poisons the well beneath it is no gift to the village. He stated, his eyes on Tom. Before Tom could launch into a defense of his company's water-neutral processing, Isabella gently raised a hand. She translated the sheikh's words, but added a layer of context for Tom. He is not accusing us of anything, Mr. Sterling. He is asking about our legacy. In his culture, a project's worth is measured not just in its immediate profit, but in its impact on the 7th generation to come. He wants to know if the well will still be pure for his great-great-grandchildren. Armed with this profound understanding, Tom's answer was transformed. He didn't just speak of filtration systems and recycling protocols. He spoke of his own grandfather, a farmer, whose land had been ruined by a chemical company upstream, and how that family story was the very reason he had founded Sterling Innovations on a principle of sustainable, clean energy. He spoke with a passion and sincerity that had been absent all night. Isabella translated his story, her voice weaving his personal history into the grander narrative of corporate responsibility, making it resonate with the sheikh's values of family and legacy. For the first time, Sheikh Khalid saw not just a CEO, but a man. When the dessert plates were cleared and fragrant mint tea was served in traditional glasses, the sheikh shared stories of his own youth in the Rub al-Khali desert, describing how his tribe could navigate by the stars and the scent of the wind. It was a world away from Tom's reality of stock tickers and quarterly reports, and he listened with a new humbling sense of his own ignorance. As the evening concluded, Sheikh Khalid stood. He shook Tom's hand, his grip firm, and his smile genuine. "Mr. Sterling, you have a remarkable company," he said, and Isabella's voice gave the translation a warmth it had previously lacked. "Your technology is impressive. But tonight I have learned that your greatest asset is not your patents or your machinery." His gaze shifted to Isabella, and the respect in his eyes was absolute. "It is this young woman. Her integrity and wisdom are rarer than any precious metal. She does not just speak a language, she speaks the truth." He then addressed Isabella directly in Arabic, his tone soft and paternal. "You have your father's spirit, child. You honor his name." He gave a slight, respectful bow of his head, before he and a visibly impressed Fahad departed into the New York night. For a long moment after they left, the three of them, Tom, Robert, and Isabella, remained at the table. The silence was immense, a vacuum left by the departure of such a powerful presence. The clatter of the restaurant, which had been a dull background hum, now seemed loud and intrusive. Robert Vance, a man of numbers who was rarely at a loss for words, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. He looked at Isabella, his face a mask of awe and disbelief. "I have been in this business for 30 years, he said, his voice hoarse. "I've sat in on deals in Riyadh, Tokyo, and Frankfurt. I have never ever seen anything like what you did tonight. You didn't just save the deal. You elevated it. You made it something more. Thank you isn't a big enough word, but it's all I have." Isabella, her composure a shield against the dizzying events, simply inclined her head. "I was happy I could be of assistance, Mr. Vance." Robert nodded, gathered his briefcase, and with a final appreciative look at Isabella and a questioning glance at his boss, he quietly excused himself. He knew this was a moment that did not require his presence. Now they were truly alone. The table, littered with the evidence of a 4-course meal, felt like a battlefield after the truce had been signed. Tom didn't speak. He rose from his chair and walked slowly to the vast plate-glass window, turning his back to her. He stared out at the glittering tapestry of the city, a view that normally filled him with a sense of ownership and power. Tonight it made him feel small. Each light represented a life, a story, a universe of experiences he knew nothing about. He had built his empire by mastering systems, predicting markets, and outmaneuvering his rivals. He treated life like a complex algorithm to be solved. But Isabella, she understood it as a poem to be felt. His entire world was one of black and white data points. She had just revealed to him an infinite spectrum of color he never knew existed. His mind reeled back not to his successes, but to a painful buried memory. He was 22, fresh out of college, with a prototype he'd built in his garage. He was in a venture capitalist's office in Silicon Valley, his hands shaking as he gave his pitch. The VC, a man of immense wealth and influence, had taken a call in the middle of his presentation, then checked his watch 3 times. At the end, he'd looked at Tom's worn-out sneakers and cheap suit and said, "Good idea, kid, but you're not one of us. Come back when you learn how to look the part." The dismissal had been so casual, so utterly devastating. It had lit a fire of ambition in him, but it had also forged an armor of arrogance around his heart. He had sworn he would never be that powerless kid again, and tonight he had become that venture capitalist. He had looked at Isabella's uniform, not the brilliant mind within it. He had judged her station, not her substance. The shame of it was a physical weight pressing down on his chest. Finally he turned around. The harsh lines of his face were softened by the dim light, and his eyes, usually blazing with intensity, held a deep, troubled vulnerability. "Ms. Rossi." Isabella. He started, his voice quiet, stripped of all its commanding boardroom resonance. I need to apologize to you, and I need to do it properly. What I did earlier tonight, spilling the water, that was a clumsy accident. But my reaction, that was a choice. It was a moment of deliberate cruelty. I dismissed you. I made you feel invisible because it was easier than acknowledging my own frustration. It was arrogant, it was ignorant, and it was unforgivable. There is no excuse for it. I am profoundly sorry. The apology was so specific, so deeply self-aware, that it disarmed her. She had expected a cursory "sorry about" before. This was a confession. She saw that the apology was not for her benefit, but for his own. It was a man trying to reconcile himself with a part of his character he could no longer stand to look at. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice even. "I accept your apology." "Please call me Tom," he said, shaking his head. "And an apology is just words. It changes nothing about what happened, what you possess. This ability to see the world through other people's eyes, to understand the heart behind the words. It's a form of genius, and I almost threw it away with the trash." He walked back to the table, his movements deliberate, his focus entirely on her. "I have spent the last hour realizing that Sterling Innovations has a catastrophic vulnerability. We have the best engineers, the best analysts, the best technology in the world. But we have no wisdom. We are blind and deaf to the very cultures we want to work with. That ends tonight." He leaned against the table, his expression one of fierce intensity. "I am not offering you a bonus or a thank you gift. I am offering you a position, a senior executive role. I am creating a new department effective immediately, the Department of International Relations and Cultural Strategy. You would be its first director. You would report directly to me. You would build your own team, set your own budget, and your first task would be to fundamentally change the way this company sees the world. Your salary will be whatever you ask for. I will not even counter." The sheer scale of the offer was dizzying. It was a rocket ship to a different life, a life she thought she had lost forever. The scholar, the diplomat, the woman of the world, he was offering her a chance to be all those things again. A wave of emotion, hope so fierce it was painful, washed over her. But her past had also taught her to be wary of sudden turns of fortune, of powerful men and their grand gestures. She held his gaze, her own, steady and clear. "Mr. Sterling, Tom, that is an extraordinary offer. But I have to be honest with you. Why are you doing this? Is this your way of easing a guilty conscience? Are you offering me this job because you feel sorry for me, or because you want to fix the mess you made tonight?" It was a direct challenge, a test. Was this an act of pity or an act of strategy? Tom didn't even blink. A wry, humorless smile touched his lips. "An hour ago, my motive would have been guilt. Absolutely. It would have been a high-priced way for me to sleep at night. But after watching you turn a dead deal into a genuine partnership, after realizing you saw a truth that my entire multi-million-dollar team missed, now my motive is pure, unadulterated self-interest. You just showed me that I'm trying to win a chess game, and you're the only person in the room who knows how to play. My company cannot succeed on a global scale without someone like you. I'm not offering you this job to be a good person. I'm offering it because I am a good CEO, and I know a priceless asset when I see one. I need you. My company needs you." His raw honesty was more compelling than any flowery promise. This wasn't a handout, it was a recognition of her power. Just as the weight of his words settled between them, his phone emitted a soft buzz on the table. He glanced at it, expecting a market update or an email from his legal team. His eyes widened slightly as he read the text message. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face, the first truly genuine smile she had seen from him. Without a word, he turned the screen toward her. It was from Fahad. The message read, "Sheikh Khalid was deeply impressed. He has one final condition for the deal. He insists that Miss Rossi be appointed as the official project liaison for Sterling Innovations. He says her presence guarantees the soul of the project will be honored. The deal is yours if you agree. Congratulations." Tom looked up from the phone, his eyes locking with hers, a newfound respect shining in them. "So it seems it's no longer just my offer," he said, his voice a low murmur that held the weight of a new world of possibilities. "It's now a contractual obligation from a sovereign wealth fund, the first order of business for the new director. What do you say, Ms. Rossi? Are you ready to manage a $300 million deal?" The taxi ride from the gilded cage of Aria in Manhattan to the quiet, tree-lined streets of her Queens neighborhood felt like traveling between parallel universes. Isabella sat in the back, the city lights smearing across the window as the driver navigated the bridge. In her hands, she clutched a simple business card Tom had given her, his personal cell number scrawled on the back. It felt heavier than a gold brick, a tangible link to the impossible reality she was now facing. The scent of expensive perfume on her uniform mingled with the faint, familiar smell of street food and autumn leaves from her own borough. The whiplash was profound. 1 hour ago, she was the linchpin in a $300 million international deal. Now she was calculating if she had enough cash for the taxi fare, or if she'd have to use the emergency credit card. She let herself into the small second-floor apartment she shared with her mother. The air was filled with the comforting aroma of cardamom and old books. Her mother Amara was asleep in her armchair, a novel resting on her lap. The television was on its volume, low, casting flickering shadows on her face, etching lines of worry that even sleep could not erase. Seeing her like this, so fragile and so far from the vibrant, confident woman who had hosted ambassadors in their Damascus home, solidified something in Isabella's heart. This wasn't just about reclaiming her own future. It was about restoring her mother's peace. She gently woke her. "Mama, I'm home." Amara's eyes fluttered open. "Isabella, my dear, it is so late. Was it a difficult night?" Isabella sat on the ottoman at her mother's feet, a position she hadn't taken since she was a child. "The most difficult," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "and the most incredible." For the next hour, she recounted the entire story. She left nothing out: Tom's piercing arrogance, the humiliation of the spilled water, the translator's panicked face, the sheikh's poetic metaphors about the desert. She described the terror she felt stepping forward, the words of her father echoing in her mind. And finally, she told her of the impossible offer and the sheikh's stunning condition. Amara listened, her hands clasped over her heart, her expression shifting from anger at the initial insult to astonishment, and finally to a deep, radiant pride that seemed to smooth the weary lines from her face. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of profound joy. When Isabella finished, Amara reached out and cradled her daughter's face in her hands. "When your father was a young attaché," she began, her voice a soft, melodic Arabic. "He was in a tense negotiation over water rights. The other side was angry, distrustful. Everyone was shouting. Your father said nothing. He simply asked the lead negotiator to tell him about his grandfather's favorite camel." Amara smiled at the memory. The man was shocked, but he told the story. And in that story of a beloved animal, your father found a shared value, a love for legacy for things that sustain life. He built his bridge from there. She looked deep into Isabella's eyes. Tonight you did not just find a common language. You found his camel, Isabella. You found the heart. Your father, oh, he would be so proud. Not of the money, not of the title. He would be proud because you chose understanding over anger. You built a bridge, my daughter. You must cross it. That was all the confirmation Isabella needed. But she would not cross it as a supplicant. She would cross it as an equal. She did not sleep that night. Fueled by coffee and a lifetime of suppressed ambition, she sat at her small kitchen table and drafted a 2-page memorandum of acceptance. It was a document of breathtaking audacity and strategic brilliance. She accepted the position of executive director, but proposed a title change to Chief Cultural Officer, a role with C-suite authority. She outlined a 90-day plan that included a top-down review of all international communications and training protocols. She detailed the mandate for her new department, explicitly stating a hiring policy that would prioritize qualified candidates from immigrant and refugee communities, leveraging their first-hand global experience. She formally proposed the establishment of the Sterling Foundation for New Americans, to be funded by an annual 0.5% of all profits from deals her department facilitated, which would partner with non-profits to help skilled refugees get their foreign credentials recognized in the US. Finally, she included a section on executive immersion, which required all senior VPs and Tom himself to complete 40 hours of cultural sensitivity and language training within the first 6 months. She emailed the document to him at 4:15 a.m. with the subject line, Terms of Acceptance. Tom received it on his phone as he was staring out the window of his penthouse apartment, having also not slept. He read it once, then twice. He didn't feel anger or offense at her boldness. He felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated respect. This wasn't a list of demands from a grateful waitress. This was the first strategic directive from his new chief cultural officer. It was brilliant, principled, and exactly what the company needed. He replied in less than 5 minutes. His response was just 5 words. I agree to all terms. Welcome aboard. Her first day at Sterling Innovations felt like stepping onto a different planet. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and steel, the air humming with quiet, ruthless efficiency. She remembered standing in this very lobby months ago, her resume for a janitorial position in hand, only to be told by a dismissive security guard that she was overqualified and should try a temp agency. Today, that same guard snapped to attention and buzzed her through to the executive elevator with a respectful "Good morning, Ms. Rossi." The 50th floor was a world of hushed carpets and panoramic views. As Tom introduced her to the senior staff, she could feel their gazes a mixture of raw curiosity, skepticism, and a healthy dose of fear. The legend of the Aria dinner had already ripped through the corporate grapevine. They saw a poised young woman in a simple but elegant suit, but they knew she wielded an influence that had brought their fearsome CEO to heel and saved the company's biggest ever deal. Tom's introduction was brief and direct. This is Isabella Rossi, our new Chief Cultural Officer. She has my full and unconditional support. Her department is critical to our future. Listen to her. Their first one-on-one meeting was in his office. It was a vast, minimalist space that felt more like an art gallery than a workspace. Tom motioned for her to sit, but remained standing himself, looking out the window in a pose that was now familiar to her. I have a confession, he said without turning around. I started taking Arabic lessons this morning. My tutor says I have the worst accent he has ever heard. Isabella allowed a small smile. It's a difficult language, Tom. That's not the point, he said finally, turning to face her. The point is, for the first time in 10 years, I'm a beginner at something. I'm uncomfortable. I'm out of my depth. It's exactly where I need to be. That's the first thing you've already taught me. He slid a black security card across the desk. Your office is next to mine. Let's get to work. Isabella didn't just get to work. She started a revolution. Her first hires were a former economics professor from Venezuela, who had been driving for Uber, a software engineer from Nigeria, who had been working in retail, and a marketing guru from Ukraine, who had been waiting tables alongside her. They were brilliant, hungry, and saw the world with a perspective that sterling innovations desperately lacked. The partnership between Isabella and Tom became the new engine of the company. It was not a romance. It was something far rarer and more powerful. It was a symbiosis of vision and wisdom. He was the unstoppable force. She was the immovable object of principle that guided him. She would challenge his aggressive timelines, forcing him to see the human cost, while he would push her to think bigger, to apply her diplomatic skills on a global scale. 6 months after she started, as she stood looking out the window of her own corner office, she saw Tom across the glass partition in his struggling through a video call with his Arabic tutor. He looked up, caught her eye, and gave a frustrated but good-natured shrug. In that moment, Isabella understood the full scope of what had happened. The world would see a story of a billionaire who had given a waitress a fairy tale opportunity. But she knew the truth was far more complex. Tom Sterling hadn't saved her from a life of servitude. He had given her a platform, but she had seized it on her own terms. The real salvation that night at Aria had been his. She had saved him from the gilded prison of his own arrogance, from the blindness that comes with unchecked power. She had held up a mirror, and instead of flinching, he had been brave enough to truly look at his own reflection. In saving him, she had finally reclaimed herself, becoming the woman her father had always raised her to be, a builder of bridges on a foundation of her own making. The story of Tom and Isabella reminds us that the most valuable assets we have are not listed on any stock exchange. They are empathy, understanding, and the courage to see the humanity in everyone regardless of their station in life. We all have a hidden language, a unique skill, a story that is invisible to the world until we are given a chance to speak. This story isn't just about a waitress and a CEO. It's about the incredible untapped potential that exists all around us, waiting in the shadows for a single moment of connection. If this story moved you and reminded you of the power of looking beyond first impressions, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and prove that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one you notice least.